studios of KPFK Pacifica Radio in Los Angeles, this is Uprising, and I'm Sonali Kohatkar. It's Tuesday, February 10th, 2015. An update on Greece as the anti-austerity Syriza party continues to take Europe by storm. We'll speak with Natassa Romanou. She's a member of Syriza. And we'll hear an archived interview with Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis. Plus, Matt Sawaya, a.k.a. Matre, an LA-based underground hip-hop artist, joins us in studio to discuss his new single, Listen, addressing militarization of our public schools. That's coming up after the news. Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Robert Jensen. He is a professor of journalism at the University of Texas at Austin. Hi, Robert.
Hello, Sonali.
Well, it looks like we are getting some audio interference right now. Okay. So Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has revealed that he has kept apprised of U.S.-led airstrikes on the Islamic State group. Although Assad has waged a brutal war against Syrian rebels and has been shown to target civilians through indiscriminate weaponry, such as barrel bombs, the U.S.'s war against ISIS has made Assad a de facto bedfellow with the West. Assad maintains that all the information he receives ahead of time is through third parties, such as the Iraqi government, and that no tactical information is shared. Meanwhile, the hacktivist collective Anonymous has been waging its own war against ISIS in cyberspace. Anonymous, which has been the target of internal U.S. law enforcement, claims it has disabled hundreds of Twitter accounts, a dozen Facebook pages, and 50 email accounts that it believes are tied to ISIS militants. President Barack Obama today plans to request from Congress authorization for use of military force against ISIS months after the war was launched. So, Bob, now the U.S. is fighting alongside Bashar al-Assad and Anonymous against ISIS. Did you ever think it would come to this?
Well, I was just wondering if you could turn over the Defense Department to Anonymous, take it out of the hands of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Could we do any worse? Maybe Anonymous could do better. I hate to think of it. But, this notion of the U.S. siding with a dictator, there's nothing particularly new about that. Remember that, the United States went back and forth supporting and then opposing Saddam Hussein in Iraq. These are very calculated decisions made, no moral really compass to the U.S. policy. But it reminds us that the solution to problems in the Middle East are always regional, and they always involve supporting the legitimate democratic aspirations, not just trading support for this dictator or that dictator. In that sense, U.S. policy has been failed for 65 years now.
The Guardian has just revealed ties between clients of HSBC's Swiss bank and the Clinton Foundation. HSBC is one of the largest banks in the world, and a Swiss bank that it had acquired has come under intense scrutiny recently after a bank employee turned whistleblower revealed client information. Among those wealthy account holders who have stashed their money away from tax collectors in the Swiss bank are several people who donated tens of millions of dollars to the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. While there is no evidence yet of any laws being broken, the revelations may turn into a PR problem for Hillary Clinton as she launches a presidential campaign on a populist platform of addressing income inequality. Bob, are you even slightly surprised that the Clinton Foundation has no problem accepting donations from people keeping their millions offshore?
It sometimes seems like the Clinton family, Bill, Hillary, Chelsea, they excel in moral gray areas. They seem to have cornered the market on that. Even the Bush family doesn't really compete with them there. But, there's no surprise in this. Bill Clinton was a neoliberal president. When he was in government, he pursued that era of privatization and gutting government services. And so in the private sector running a foundation, is it any surprise he has the same values? In some sense, we should never be shocked when the Clintons, the whole family, displays this kind of, pragmatic and amoral behavior. It's pretty par for the course given their record in government.
And finally, the Equal Justice Initiative has released a groundbreaking new report this morning on lynchings in the United States. The report, entitled Lynching in America, Confronting the Legacy of Racial Terror, documents the extent of a horrific U.S. practice. EJI exhaustively researched archives to find 700 more incidents of lynchings than the best documented history to date. The total number of documented lynchings now stands at 3,959. The report refers to the practice as, quote, terror lynchings, and is intent on having the U.S. confront the history of a practice that it has never fully faced. Bob, how important is such a report today, particularly given the current political context of ongoing racial injustice in the U.S.?
Well, it's crucial. In the United States, we love to talk about history and the importance of history up until the point where that history becomes uncomfortable. So this is the kind of history that really matters. I live in Texas now, and the the sort of evidence of this is all around us. I don't have to look very far, whether it's frat parties that just happen on campus with racist themes or not. So it's an old saw that you can't understand the present without understanding the past. And unfortunately, we too often want to exclude the uncomfortable past, whether it's lynchings or the fact that we had de facto slavery in the American South during the 20th century through convict leasing. All of these are crucial if we're going to understand ongoing racial disparities today.
And we will be covering this report very soon in the coming days. Robert Jensen, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sonali.
Robert Jensen is our daily Newsflash guest expert. He's an author and a professor of journalism at the University of Texas at Austin. This is Uprising, and when we come back from break, we will turn once more to Greece, a topic that we've been covering quite a lot in the past several weeks or so since a leftist party swept elections there. Not only will we be getting a report on what's happening right now with a member of the Syriza party, we'll also hear an archival interview with the man who is now Greece's finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. You can now watch Uprising online at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Uprising with Sonali. Please do subscribe. Greece has said it will adopt many of the reforms imposed on it as part of a bailout plan agreed upon by earlier elected officials. Under the bold new leadership of Alexis Tsipras, the Syriza party, Greece says that it will reject about 30% of austerity measures. Since the election just weeks ago that swept Syriza into power, European markets have remained unsure and stocks have tumbled, prompting the S&P index to downgrade the nation's ratings. The new direction has sent Greece into a collision course with Germany ahead of two top-level meetings of European leaders this week. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has made it clear that the terms of the original bailout must be adhered to. Still, officials concede that Greek democracy chose another path forward in electing Syriza, signaling a deep frustration with depression-like conditions over the past 5 years. Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis has taken a particularly strong position, saying, quote, "The Troika is over," referring to the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the IMF, who are Greece's main creditors. He also challenged the threat of the Eurozone kicking out Greece, warning that, quote, "Greece's exit from the Euro is not something that is part of our plans, simply because we believe it is like building a house of cards. If you take out the Greek card, the others will collapse." My guest is Natassa Romanou. She is a research professor at Columbia University in Climate Studies and a member of Syriza and the eco-socialist group System Change, not Climate Change. She is a founding member of Syriza New York and AKNY. She was in Greece for the elections. Hi, Natassa. The Wall Street Journal has said that, quote, "The new government has sent out mixed messages." It says it won't ask for an extension of its current bailout, which lapses at the end of February, but will propose sweeping reforms to secure continued financing from Eurozone partners. So the question, of course, is whether or not you agree with this analysis. And if so, why the mixed messages?
Yeah, well, I don't think that the government sent out mixed messages. In fact, the government is set to fulfill its obligations of the mandate that it received from the Greek people on January 25th, the election day. then that is put an end to the troika, or the era of troika, and the memoranda. Memoranda are the directives that.
Can you hear us, Natassa? Your audio just cut out. Go ahead. Can you hear us? We're going to call you right back. Natassa Romanou is our guest. She's a research professor at Columbia University in Climate Studies and also a member of Syriza. She's also a member of a group that calls itself Eco-Socialist System Change, Not Climate Change, and she was in Greece for the elections. Are you with us, Natassa? We're having some trouble with her audio, so we shall try to get her on the phone. Natassa Romanou, a research professor at Columbia University. The big news is that Syriza faces two major meetings this week in Europe with European leaders, where the debt renegotiation and the terms of its bailout with earlier elected officials will take place. And of course, the main problem is that Germany, which is the main defender of the bailout terms and of austerity measures, is very much in opposition to Greece renegotiating any of its bailout terms. And of course, what's important about this entire story is the ripple effect that it can have, not only across Europe, but really across the world when we think about neoliberal economic policies. Are you with us, Natassa? Okay, we're trying to get Natassa on the phone in just a moment. We will try to bring her on. We apologize for our technical problems. The other issue, of course, is the challenge that Syriza party leaders like Alexis Tsipras and Yanis Varoufakis face in the general landscape of European politics, essentially adopting an approach that is antithetical to the standard practice of IMF's, of the International Monetary Fund's austerity policies, cutting and slashing social programs in order to pay off debt. If Greece goes forward with its plan under Tsipras, countries like Italy and Spain may also do the same. We're going to actually take a short break while we try to get Natassa on the phone with us. Do bear with us. We'll be right back after this. And Natassa Romanou now joins us on the phone. Hi, Natassa. So you were trying to answer this question of whether or not the government was sending mixed messages. Natassa?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. I do not agree that the government is actually sending out mixed messages. The government has been set to fulfill the obligation of the mandate it received on January 25th, the election day, and that is to put an end to the Troika, the era of the Troika, and the era of the memoranda. The memoranda are the directives that the Troika, together with the previous government of Greece, has imposed and enforced for the reconstructing of the Greek economy, and which essentially amounted to nothing less than a harsh austerity program, which puts burdens on the mid and the low incomes and less so on the higher incomes. So the government does not ask for an extension of the bailout package. It is asking actually for a bridge program that will take us to the June 2015 and will have no impact on the taxpayers in the European Union. We are not asking for any more money from the European taxpayers. We never asked for this money. We were forced to take these bailout packages. And moreover, and this is a key issue, the government will not have now to follow the Troika's catastrophic austerity policies. It will start implementing its own program of relieving the humanitarian crisis, which is the most important right now, and gradually increase the lower incomes, the homeless, address the homelessness and the chronically unemployed people, people without electricity, school kids with no food, and those threatened by foreclosures. And these are the measures that the government wants to take upon right
so
now.
When you were saying that they essentially want a bridge program, is the end goal a sort of plan that a New Deal-like plan that Tsipras has mentioned there that would essentially require banks or request from banks to invest 10 times the amount that it has in a similar way to what we saw in the 1930s in the United States? Is Tsipras, what is Tsipras waiting for in order to implement such a New Deal?
Yeah. So there is this bridge program that Varoufakis has proposed. I mean, the government of Syriza has proposed to the European Union. It's a sort of a short-term solution to the debt problem of Greece. However, what Syriza maintains, and what is actually the truth, is that the debt problem is not just a Greek problem. It's a problem throughout Southern Europe. All the countries, Greece, Spain, Italy, Portugal, they've had this problem. Ireland also in Northern Europe. In many other Northern European countries, this is becoming an issue. So what Syriza has proposed is that we need to have a European conference in which we'll bring all the stakeholders in the same room, on the same table, around the same table, to talk about policymakers, the public unions, pension funds, everybody, creditors together, and then we'll sit down and find a solution to the debt problem as a whole, right? And so what Varoufakis is talking right now is that this package will be negotiated tomorrow in Eurogroup. That new deal will be negotiated tomorrow. It's on the table tomorrow, right? And the Greek economy, and Tsipras will have to follow on that. Tsipras will, the Syriza government will have to will follow the decisions of tomorrow's Eurogroup.
So now, Tsipras, I understand, has demanded, among the many statements that he's made, reparations from Germany's Nazi occupation era, also pointed to Germany's own historic writing off of its debts after World War II, which enabled Germany to start from scratch and embark on a prosperous future that it now enjoys. But I don't think German leaders were quite pleased to hear about those requests.
Yes, of course they are not very pleased. But the truth of the matter is that if you look at the situation back in the 1920s in Germany and the situation right now in Southern Europe, particularly in Greece, are very similar. And back at that time, you had the collapse of the American stock market in 1929, and then you had the rise and you had massive unemployment. You have the economy collapsed. The government came back and wanted to and did a lot of cut the social expenditures, cut the wages, and alienated people so much that they turned to fascism. Now, this is exactly what's happening right now. After the 2000 crisis in the world economy, we have economies like Greece crumbling down. The debt has been enormous after that. The interest rates on debt have been enormous after that. And so what the governments, the conservative governments, have been doing is implementing austerity, cutting wages and so forth. And the public is suffering. And of course, it's turning to fascism. Now, in Greece today, it turns into fascism. The third party right now in Greece's parliament is Golden Dawn, which is a neo-fascist party, right? But thankfully, Greece didn't go as far as to make the dominant party a fascist party. The dominant party right now is the left party in Greece because we diagnosed the problem. I mean, that's austerity and the policies that are causing the problems and not the political system, not democracy. But the thing is that, so the similarities are there. The German leaders have to recognize that, and then have to recognize that the community, the world community, Spain and Italy, who fought against fascism in the Second World War, they were among the countries which actually came back after the war and said, okay, we will give a haircut to your national debt. 50% haircut they gave to Germany back in 1953. And they also said, they put a clause into the arrangement that said that you will only repay the remainder of your debt if you have surplus in your budget. And that's precisely what Greece is asking right now. So I don't see, I mean, I do see why the German leaders right now, conservatives, they want to maintain their country's wealth. They want to maintain strong, the austerity programs because that's their policy. And that's why they don't want to recognize that there are similarities between Greece today and Germany back then.
I want to pick up, Natassa, on what you said about how these policies feed into fascism, pointing to the Golden Dawn Party in Greece, which is a right-wing neo-fascist party, as many have pointed out, and you just pointed out. Yanis Varoufakis himself said that if Europe continued austerity policies, the only people who would benefit would be, quote, those who hate European democracy democracy, referring to Golden Dawn, but also groups like the National Front in France and the Independence Party in the United Kingdom, all of these sort of right-wing nationalist and racist parties. But explain how austerity benefits these sorts of parties, because there are lessons to be learned even here in the United States, if that's true.
Yes, absolutely. Those are exactly the parties and the ideologies which actually gain from austerity. They gain from the fact that that there is unemployment, people are desperate, they can't seem to find solution in the state, so they go back against the state itself and democracy itself.
Now, does it enable them to essentially scapegoat minorities, saying that they're taking away jobs for nationals?
Exactly. Very similarly to the, like Nazi Germany, where they turn against the Jews. Now in Greece, they turn against the immigrants because they consider that they are responsible that they don't find jobs. Whereas the truth is that they don't find the jobs because the government has, is not providing jobs for anyone, let alone when immigrants come in the country. But the truth is that. These parties don't like the cross-cultural idea, cooperation and democratic processes of Europe, right? So that's why they thrive, and the anti-European mentality is thriving right now in Europe. But I think that this is one group of people who benefit, one group that benefits from the austerity, etc. The other group is the political and the economic elites in Europe.
Sure.
And they are not necessarily affiliated with any parties, right? But they are the neoliberal forces which are imposing their agenda, the free and rampant market policies, the privatizations, cutting the wages, restricting worker rights and compensations, and all this in the name of economy. The former, we know who they are. We know the parties, we know the National Front, we know the Golden Dawn, we know the UKIP, and we can address them. We can ask people not to vote for them. But the latter, they are hidden, right? They are pervasive, and they have encroached in many political parties. And personally, I think these are we need to expose the role of the latter into the anti-European into their anti-European role as well.
So neoliberal elites who might be nameless and faceless, but certainly are embodied by corporate heads. Let's talk about finally what the U.S. role is and the lessons of Greece in the United States. President Barack Obama has actually apparently called on Germany to concede, at least to an extent, to Syriza's demand. Is the U.S. playing a positive role? And if Greece can use the electoral process to have a leftward sweep, can that happen in the United States?
Yeah. So I think that President Obama has played a very positive role since his first presidency term. And he has been putting pressure, and the Federal Reserve has been putting pressure to this counterpart, which is the European Central Bank, to get away from austerity. And actually it makes sense because Obama, in a very similar situation after the crisis in 2008 here in the U.S., chose the opposite way than Europe is choosing today. Chose the opposite of austerity. He provided quantitative easing, he propped up the economy, he bought back debt, he protected the welfare state and supported the employment, he controlled red loans, etc. I'm not saying that he did everything right, that everything is right. There are not problems in that process as well. Definitely there are, and they should be discussed. But the idea is that he went a different way. Now, the inequality and the austerity that economic policies are imposing in the country, I think radicalize people, and that's where the lesson is to the U.S. electoral basis, right? As people recognize that the political elites are allied with economic elites, and they are not serving the public good, the common good, they will try to find different solutions. It's important for different voices to exist, even if they are not major parties, even if they're only movements out in the streets. They're important to exist because those are the ones that will be the deathbed, like Syriza, like the nursery that will give rise to a much more massive movement and change of things.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Natassa, for joining us today, and best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Natassa Romanou is a research professor at Columbia University in climate studies. She's also a member of the Syriza party and the eco-socialist group System Change, not Climate Change. She's a founding member of Syriza New York. She was in Greece for the elections. We turn next to an interview that I'd done with Greece's newly appointed finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis. Mr. Varoufakis has become something of a cult figure in Europe in just the past few weeks. But before he ran for election as an MP with Syriza, he was a professor of economics at the University of Texas at Austin. And in November 2012, I interviewed him on Uprising about Greece's ongoing financial problems. Here is that interview. Welcome to Uprising, Yanis.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, first, let's talk about the immediate news coming in from Greece. What do you make of the fact that Eurozone ministers are not going to, at least so far, release the next round of loans to Greece? And what do they mean by making Greece's debt more sustainable?
Well, their chickens are coming home to roost. For 3 years, Europe has been in denial about the nature of the crisis. Greece is an insolvent state, and not just Greece, other states in the Eurozone. So instead of accepting the fact that it was insolvent and dealing with its debt overhang, its unsustainable debt, what the great and the wise and the good in Europe decided to do is to lend Greece a lot more money at quite high interest rates, and to do that on condition that Greece could reduce its income, its national income, because that's what austerity does. This is complete madness, is it not? So you have somebody who's bankrupt, and what you do is you give them a lot more loans on condition that they will reduce their income. So eventually, after a series of such loan tranches and austerity cuts, which have shrunk Greek GDP by 55 billion euros, something like $70 billion in a short space of time. Now they've come to the end of their tether. They're realizing that this strategy can't work. But the alternative to this strategy is to come clean, to stop being in denial, and to accept that the Greek debt simply has to be written off to a large degree, and that you can't keep this pretense that Greece is on the sustainable path when the economy is shrinking at around -9%, -10%. And this is the 5th or 6th year of recession. It is just quite remarkable that we are continuing along those lines in Europe.
Now, what do you make of the vote that was taken last week that was essentially a privatization law that was passed by the Greek parliament? How is this supposed to address Greece's crisis?
Look, the official version is that because Greece has a very large debt, that one of the ways in which to deal with it is to sell off government-owned assets to repay the debt. Now, the tragedy, of course, is that Greece is in its Great Depression, and I mean that. This is the grapes of wrath here. John Steinbeck would have written a novel had he been alive and living in Greece. So the problem with the Great Depression is that nobody's buying anything. So the assets that are owned by the Greek government are simply not wanted by anyone. You can sell them, but you're going to sell them at a ridiculously low price, and you won't make any revenues in order to repay debt. Now, what is happening is this. The Europeans are continuing to pump money into the Greek debt, making it greater, but in order to convince their own parliaments that they should do this, and the vested interest, let's say, in Germany, they're giving them some morsels to satisfy them. And one of them is, for instance, promising large corporations like Siemens in Germany chunks of the Greek electricity grid. This is just one example. So this is what privatization does. It's being utilized by the powers that be as a way of winning support by the captains of industry in Northern Europe for maintaining this loan pumping into the Greek state, which is unsustainable and quite misanthropic, both in terms of its negative impact on the people of Germany and the people of Greece.
Now, doesn't privatization also take away potential sources of income at a future better time for the country?
Of course, it destroys them. And it's not just taking it away from the future betterment of the country. Greece is in a tailspin now, so things are going to get worse in the future, especially if Greece is pushed out of the Eurozone, which is a possibility. It's not a certainty, but it is a possibility. It is at that time that the Greek state will really need to utilize all the resources at its disposal. So if it now gets rid of its, the family silver at ridiculously low prices and is forced to use this money in order to buy back unsustainable debt that it will never be able to repay anyway, then the family silver is going to be wasted, and it will not be able to use it when it's absolutely necessary to use it at a time when Greece may be cast out of the Eurozone.
Now, do you see what's happening in Greece, broadly speaking, as a kind of what Naomi Klein calls shock doctrine?
I think Naomi Klein's shock doctrine is a very good example of what was going on in the 90s and just before the crash of 2008. It is a version of that. It's a variant of that. It's what happens when the shock doctrine that Klein was referring to gave rise to speculative bubble, which then burst, because it's what happened in 2008, 2009, 2010, globally and in particular in Europe. And once that bubble has burst, the elites are in disarray, and they don't know how to deal with the situation. So they try to buy time, and they try to buy time by pretending that bankruptcies of banks and states are not there, and that they can simply deal with them by bailing them out by means of loans. But the way in order to do this is, and to convince the financial sector that this is the way to do it, is by promising the financial sector that it will be the taxpayers, and especially the low-income taxpayers, who will foot the bill for the bailouts. So then they impose harsh austerity that affects the low-income groups, and that locks the elites into a kind of cycle of which they become victims too. So the tragedy is that there aren't any victors here. This is not a standard class struggle where squeezing labor enriches capital. Now we have a situation in Europe. We have the ultimate idiocy where everybody is actually losing, except for some spivs and speculators.
Can you also talk a little bit about how this crisis and the response to the crisis by those in power is affecting Greek society? On the one hand, you have hundreds of thousands of people rallying the streets against the austerity measures for good reason. And then on the other hand, you have this sharp rise in racist attacks against migrants, which perhaps historically speaking shouldn't come as much of a surprise. But what is your analysis of the social reaction on the ground?
1929 and its aftermath should have taught us that a great financial collapse, if it is allowed to infect the real economy and turn into a depression, does two things. The first thing it does, it destroys the financial system, it destroys the common currency of the era, the gold standard then, the euro now. And the second thing it does, very soon you have Nazis in parliament and stormtroopers on the streets and pogroms of women, of migrants, of the other. This is exactly what is happening now in Greece. So we do have this, remember the Weimar Republic. You had labor organizers organizing against the increase in unemployment, the high cost of living, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, you had the serpent's egg hatching and creating Nazi movements. This is precisely what we have now.
In your blog, you also write about a Greek man who was found to have committed suicide because the small monthly disability allowance that he was getting of 280 euros a month was suspended because of the latest round of austerity cuts. This isn't necessarily making headlines, certainly not here in the U.S., but I suppose it's becoming an increasingly common occurrence in Greece.
Greece traditionally had one of the lowest suicide rates in the world. Now, the suicide rate is competing with the highest such rates around the globe. It has skyrocketed. People, primarily middle-aged men, who for obvious reasons, felt that it was the whole family structure was relying on them for its sustenance, are killing themselves, literally killing themselves. And there are many different forms of suicide. Some months ago, we had a very public suicide in the Sentinel Anthem Square in front of Parliament. A retired pharmacist shot himself and had left next to him a political manifesto against the political elites. There are people whose houses are being foreclosed who jump off the ceiling, of the roof, the rooftop. This latest suicide that I reported on my blog, to me, was quite poignant because it was a very silent, a very quiet one. The disabled person in question simply stole into the night, went into the woods, and hung himself, and his body was recovered a couple of months later. Each one of these stories is powerful and tragic and tells its own story. And unfortunately, as you said, they're not being reported.
You have been listening to an excerpt of a November 12th, 2012 interview that I did with former University of Texas professor Yanis Varoufakis, who is now one of the most high-profile political figures in Europe as Greece's new finance minister. And he was, of course, addressing the very human cost of what Greece has been going through under austerity for several years. This is Uprising. I'm Sonali Kohatkar. You can now watch Uprising on Free Speech TV, which airs on Dish Network Channel 9415, DirecTV Channel 348, and on hundreds of part-time cable affiliates and on Roku. A bill in Wyoming State Assembly overturning gun-free areas near schools passed the Republican-dominated chamber. The bill passed with a 42-17 vote and would allow concealed carry guns into public schools and government buildings. 7 states already have such laws on the books. Worse, the Federal Department of Defense has already distributed military equipment to a number of school districts, while the militarization of city police departments came to light after last year's protests in Ferguson, Missouri. A similar trend in schools has not received nearly enough attention. In fact, in documents obtained from the Department of Defense, media outlets have found that the Pentagon's so-called 1033 program has resulted in, quote, at least 125 school law enforcement agencies in 25 states that have received military gear free of charge from the Department of Defense. That includes police departments for 23 K-12 school districts and 102 colleges and universities, end of quote. Not surprisingly, the news has alarmed civil libertarians, students, and parents. It has also alarmed my guest, Sawaya, a.k.a. Matre, a Los Angeles-based hip-hop artist who has taken it upon himself to highlight the militarization of schools through his new single, Listen. Over the weekend, at an event called Students Not Suspects, he gathered a number of community members and students for a video shoot for his song. Matre has performed alongside the likes of Public Enemy, the Black Eyed Peas, and well-known Finnish rapper Paleface. He now joins me in studio. Welcome to Uprising.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for
Great
joining
to be here.
us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us first why you wrote the song Listen, which we'll get you to perform and get to hear and watch you perform later in the program. But it's not it's sort of an unusual topic to write a song about the militarization of schools.
Yeah. So it was a really personal thing for me. I've worked for about 7 years with young people in LA, both in schools and juvenile detention facilities. And I do poetry and music workshops with them. And for me, over the years, it's been a recurring theme to see young people being policed, being profiled, being treated with excessive force by police, and not being heard and listened to. And so that's why the title of the song is Listen, because I feel like if we're concerned about safety, and we're concerned about, healthy environments and spaces, I think the answer to that has a lot more to do with creating environments of trust and respect and listening to young people more than it does bringing in more police presence and more intensified military presence.
I mean, it's amazing for us to even think about the idea that schools are militarized. I mean, certainly we know that many schools, particularly inner city schools, students are required to walk through, metal detectors. They're searched and they're often disciplined. Police are called into the classroom. And once kids enter what's called the school to prison pipeline, it very much it sets them up for a life of going in and out of the prison system. And then we're hearing that military equipment is now being given by the Department of Defense?
Yeah, so, one of the things that was a real initial reaction was just like shock, and what the LA Unified School Police received was so outrageous. There were 3 grenade launchers and an armored vehicle that's a mine-resistant, vehicle that's used for, heavy military combat situations. So
and assault rifles?
Assault rifles, 61 M16 rifles. So,
I mean, what context are officials imagining they would use such equipment on students in school? K through 12 students. We're talking about, little kids all the way through teenagers.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's part of what's created the outrage. And you mentioned the metal detectors, and that was another part of what led me to write this song. I work with a teacher and have been working in his classroom for many years with his students, who currently is being threatened with disciplining by the LAUSD because he refuses to metal detect search his students. And the current policy in LAUSD demands random metal detector searching every day at high schools and middle schools. Every high school and middle school in LAUSD is asked to do a random metal detector search every day.
So I'm wondering if you can perform this song. Listen, and I should mention you've basically released the song as a free song for download.
Yeah.
We'll give our audience information about where they can get it. You're also in the middle of a funding project to finance the video shoot and the video for the song that you shot over the weekend. The song itself is available freely, but you're going to perform it for us live here in
Indeed.
studio.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. This is my guest, Matt Sawaya, a.k.a. Matre, and we're going to have some beats playing under us while he performs.
The United States Department of Defense just sent some heavy artillery to the city where I live, and it must be a hell of a monster they're trying to conquer, because they sent an armored vehicle and 3 grenade launchers. Along with that, they sent like 60 M16s. Y'all think I'm crazy like this some apocalyptic dream? This is the news, today's news, it's true. And to make it deeper, all of this was shipped to our schools. What? Yep, LA Unified School District. Police have just received a whole military shipment, and we already know who gets it. Same neighborhoods where the kids get treated like criminals daily because of the color that their skin is. Where metal detectors don't help students feel protected, but instead they send the message there's a crime and you're suspected. Meanwhile, I'm sitting on a high school class visit, wondering why it's so quiet when I ask about their ambitions. Hey, hey. I put my hand up and wait to be called. Hey, hey. But I can't wait here my whole life long. Hey, hey. They want my hands up, my face to the wall. Hey, hey. But I don't fit in these lines that you draw. Okay, so LAUSD school police just accepted an arsenal of military-grade assault weapons. Ooh, wait, correction, breaking news just detected. Apparently they did return the 3 grenade launchers I mentioned. Good move. That did seem like a little bit much, but the M16s and the armored truck, they did not give that up, nah. Know what else they didn't do? They didn't move and get it through to the military that were well aware that it simply isn't true, that somehow more weapons at school make it more safe. Send us a strategy that actually creates a safer place. Send us ears enough to hear what all our students say, and the courage to stay when the pain makes us want to turn away. Let's make our schools about asking them what they know instead of telling them what they should know, until they overflow with anger that's been pent up under all that information. Can we listen? Cause without that, is it really education? Hey. Hey, I put my hand up and wait to be called. Hey, hey, but I can't wait here my whole life long. Hey, hey, they want my hands up, my face to the wall. Hey, hey, but I don't fit in these lines that you draw. So dear LAUSD and LA School Police, I know the kids that you surround and search with those machines, the ones you're sniffing out with dogs set up in their classrooms, they're friends of mine, so now I feel I have to send you this message that they're scared and they are mad too. They do not trust their schools because they're not trusted as they pass through. And I should also make it very clear they're not alone. I am standing at the schools where your weapons grow. I am walking with the youth to protect their gold, and I am met by crowds from all around here to let you know we're parents, teachers, friends, and we feel this like an injury. We're now demanding that you treat our kids with dignity. Every student, neighborhood, vicinity, we know which youth are viewed like criminals consistently. No mystery, stop. Young people should not have to fear the cops, or that the color of their skin could have them shot. You must respect them, no exceptions. Treat them by example and put down your own weapons. And a question for the young ones, want to hear what you're envisioning. We know you hold the future on your tongues and we're listening. Hey, hey, I put my hand up and wait to be called. Hey, hey, but I can't wait here my whole life long. Hey, hey, they want my hands up, my face to the wall. Hey, hey, but I don't fit in these lines that you draw.
And that's my guest, Matt Sawaya, aka Matre, performing Listen, his new single, which is available for free download online, and covers the very outrage-provoking issue of militarization of our schools. So you work with young people, and what you were saying in the song just now about how young folks are feeling angry because they are considered with such suspicion. How deep-seated is that? I mean, when we treat young people as though they could constantly be criminal, what effect does that have on their psyche?
I think it has a tremendous effect. And I think it's not only how they're being seen, but also how they're not being seen. And so, one of the lines in the song says, "We know it simply isn't true, that somehow more weapons at school make it more safe. Send us a strategy that actually creates a safer place. Send us ears, enough to hear what all our students say, and the courage to stay when their pain makes us want to turn away." And for me, that's a really key piece of the whole thing, that we not only need to, not be profiling our young people in this way and criminalizing them in this way, but we need to take the time and energy to sit with them and really hear where they're coming from. Because when the experiences and stories that they're holding and what they've been through is not seen and heard, it builds up in other ways that end up creating more difficult situations for them and for their communities. Yeah.
And Matt, we're living at a time where sort of racial profiling is so serious now. We see not just people of color, but young people of color being profiled. We see Muslims and Arab Americans being profiled in the years after 9/11. I understand that your own background is an Arab American. You identify as Arab American. And I'm wondering if you see those common links between different communities who face this suspicion constantly just for who they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that there's a tremendous amount of fear in our country, and I feel that fear manifests itself, in scapegoating and projecting onto particular communities, and they tend to be the communities that you're mentioning, communities of color, and particularly young people and young people of color.
And why is music such an important vehicle for expressing these issues, particularly hip-hop?
So, hip-hop has always held a message of saying, I'm not going to fit in within the constraints of the social context that I'm in. So the social context around me tells me that the doors are closed and that I don't have opportunities to be who I truly am. Hip hop is saying, regardless of what I'm shown by the context that I'm in, I'm going to create the possibility to really be myself and to bring that forward. And so, so many of the young people that I work with are connected to that impulse and that spirit. They're connected to hip hop culture. And a lot of the young men I work with in the juvenile detention facilities are themselves hip hop artists and rappers. And I think it's one place where so many young people have found a voice that says, I can be empowered, even though everything around me tells me I'm not. I can create. There's a part of me that is here to do something, to contribute something. And I think, one of the real issues with our educational system as a whole is that we really structure our education around putting information into young people as if they are a box in which to place information, as opposed to trying to draw out of them what they're already carrying in them. And so we have young people that go much of their educational experience, if not their whole educational experience, without ever being asked, who are you? What are you carrying? What did you bring into the world? What are you here to do?
And hip-hop enables that?
And hip-hop is an invitation, that's been inviting us since, hip-hop culture first came into being in the early 70s or even before that, to say, who are you? And what did you bring into the world? And we're going to make sure that we have a chance to broadcast that, even if the mainstream channels aren't giving that to us.
So where can our audience listen the song that you just performed, which I understand is freely available, and also how can they support the video angle of this song that you're working on right now?
So the song is available for free download on my website, which is mcmatre.com, mcmatre.com. It's also on SoundCloud, Matre Music. And, it's, like I said, free download, so you can grab it and download it, spread it around. And then we're working right now on a music video to really tell this story in a more powerful way.
Visually.
With visuals, So we had a chance to do the first phase of that video shoot over the weekend. And part of what's been really cool about this project is that so many different people have gotten fired up, artists, to help make this happen. So an entire film crew, heard the song and started really picking up momentum. And different young people are playing the roles of the kids. And the main character actually is a young man that I work with who's been through a lot of what we're talking about in the song. So it's giving him a chance to tell that story through acting. And so we're funding that right now through a Kickstarter campaign. And definitely welcome people to collaborate with us in making this happen and making it possible for this message to get out. So Students Not Suspects is the title of the Kickstarter campaign, and also the hashtag and the meme that's sort of being spread around this campaign.
Students Not Suspects. And so you have this gathering over the weekend in Los Angeles where this program is based, where you are based, and where the LAUSD, the Los Angeles Unified School District, which has received the gift of these assault rifles and mine-resistant vehicles from the DoD, is based. What was the atmosphere like? Students Not Suspects says very clearly to young folks the direction that they would rather their school district go.
Yeah, it's been a really inspiring and powerful experience, and a challenging one. But, the turnout on Sunday, we filmed, the first day of the video shoot was at a school, telling the story about a young man being profiled in a particular way. It turns out that he's actually organizing an event. And the second day of our shoot was that event. So we had an event where a lot of the organizations who work with young people and who work with youth justice issues came out, and a lot of the young people themselves, to represent about these issues. And I think a lot of people are just really ready to say, this isn't right, and so many of these young people have lived with this kind of climate, and are really ready to stand up and say, we demand that we be treated with the dignity and respect that we deserve. And as, people that are older around them who want to support them, I think part of our role is to advocate for that and say, we stand together with you. We're not going to let you be treated this way without our support, and what I'd like to do as an artist is to help people know that this is going on, but also really bring into the dialogue, if that's not what we need, what do we need? You know, what is the alternative to help make our schools more safe?
Right, because of course the justification for bringing weapons into schools is that there's danger, there's gangs, people bring guns into school. Although if you live in a state like Wyoming or the 7 states where it's now legal to conceal carry weapons, as Republicans have passed such measures, you already create a situation that's quite dangerous. But the justification given is that there is danger in schools, that we need this protection to be able to keep folks in control. How do you respond to the powers that be? How would you talk to the LAUSD about safety being something that's a result not of weapons?
So I think there's several different approaches. Some of them have already really been actively taking place, which is, I think, important to highlight too. There are several different organizing and activist groups in LA which have already put pressure on the LAUSD police and on LAUSD to make sure that these military weapons were sent back. So the 3 grenade launchers and the truck.
Oh, the truck is gone too.
Are not here anymore.
Okay, but the assault
not
rifles,
sure exactly
the
where they
61
went.
assault rifles remain.
They're here.
Wow.
They're here. But so that's, one approach is direct pressure. The Community Rights Campaign has been one of the organizations that's really been working with this on the ground for years before this came up, and they really put a lot of pressure on LAUSD and the school police to make that happen. I'm also interested in bringing in this deeper conversation to say we need to look at how we educate in a different way.
Right, so a longer-term issue of how education is viewed.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today,
Thank you very
Sawaya,
much.
and best of luck to you. We'll post all the links from our website so that our audience can catch it.
Appreciate very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. My guest, Sawaya, a.k.a. Matre, is a Los Angeles-based hip-hop artist who's performed alongside Public Enemy, the Black Eyed Peas, and multi-platinum Finnish rapper Paleface. This is Uprising. Bipasha Shom is our senior producer. Anna Buss is our assistant producer. And Alexander Hobbs is our technical director. Christian Beck is our production assistant. Federico Garcia, Kiana Turner, and Jonathan Alexander are our audio engineers. Camilo Ramirez is our sound editor. Annie Mendoza is our social media coordinator. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/uprisingwithsonali. Our website is uprisingwithsonali.com. Our theme music is by Quetzal. I'm Sonali Kohatkar, host and executive producer of Uprising. I'll see you tomorrow.